I was just checking whether you could see the countdown or not. I thought you slid off, and then I was like, I hope he can see when we get to 1, and he knows we're recording.
I can slow it down as well, ready? And then
For everyone who's watching this thinking, what the hell are these two on about? Richard's got a new standing desk. He's very proud of it.
all the
And he
gags.
seems to be having a lot of fun sliding in and out of
down the
camera.
steps. Oh dear.
That's possibly the worst steps impression I've ever seen.
I know. You got knees and ankles and hips like mine, man. It doesn't really work very well.
Doesn't really work. But what drove the standing desk? Just
been sat down too long, and I think I was just the reason. It doesn't help because I have certain, ailments that I'm trying to remedy. It doesn't help being sat down for too long. So I just thought, well, why not? I've always fancied one. Although I did go to IKEA. We are lucky and unlucky to have an IKEA locally around the corner. And I went down, and the other desk I had was years and years old, not very big, and it just didn't. But it was falling apart. So I thought I'll go and have a look at IKEA, which is obviously the first mistake. But found one. I thought it's a reasonable price. It wasn't mad expensive. And I thought it was quite surprising, and I went, go for it. Got it back. Started putting it together. One of the whole threads that you put there was missing a thread, and it was a built-in thread, so you couldn't. So I'm like, what am I supposed to do then? I can't screw in. And nothing I had would fit because it's like tiny bespoke wooden thread. So I was like, oh, for fuck's sake. Straight off the bat. There we go. Straight on the R.
1 minute.
Well, no point in messing around to the end today, is there? And so I thought, so I had to take the bits off I put on, put it back in the box, take it back down there. Came back with went to get the second one, and you can't even pick it up at the store. They had to send you to another collection warehouse now. And you're like, this is getting more and more annoying. So I got there, and I went to the guy. I said, can I just check before I take it that it's got all the bits? Because he's like, it's one piece. And I'm like, yes. But if it's missing a constituent component, it's only 99% of that one piece, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which he didn't understand. So it was all the bits. I got it back. But yeah, that's all. It's actually, I actually do enjoy it. It's quite nice standing up.
How long did you spend explaining to the guy how 90% on 100% thing? You don't draw a diagram.
I kind of went,
no. Point him at this podcast and say, just go and watch that. You'll learn a bit about data and numbers.
And lots of other useless stuff that you don't even know. You don't even want to know about.
Anyway, enough of your drivel about a desk. What are we talking about today, Richard?
So I thought you've got, I put a post that yesterday, but the context of data in real world scenarios is something we haven't touched on before. But there was some examples of how I found in a Google search yesterday, news search about data, that a big chunk of businesses are still relying, according to this article, relying on gut feel because they can't get hold of good data or good insights. Which I kind of went, well, why is that? This is not a market research podcast, but why is that? Because you've got the systems, you got it all. Is it time? Is it awareness? Is it a lack of skill? I mean, it could be a combination of all of them, and I think it possibly is. But why is that kind of default reaction to go, I can't get it, so I'm just going to make a gut feel decision, which quite often could be right based upon experience, right? I get that, but it kind of raised a question to me going, well, why is that still? Is that still the case of, as we've mentioned before? So all these different topics are coming back together, but is it because of the portrayal of how the process is, about how complex it is, whether it's complicated, whether it's easy, is it the awareness, the PR kind of around data? Or is it a combination of absolutely everything? And I think it probably could be. And then on the second topic about how people use data effectively is how the view of it's a football analogy, but how the view of a particular position of a player, so a striker in a football team, predominantly used to be measured on goals scored. That would be the outcome of their game. That if you don't score goals, you're not very good. But now, because of the availability of all the wearables and all the visuals and all the footage and things like that, they're able to show and realize the evolution of that position to go, actually, just because they're not banging in Erling Haaland level of goals every single week doesn't mean they're crap. It just means they're adding value in different ways potentially, or not if they are crap.
Yeah.
But,
Uh,
and every chance they could play for Leicester.
Won the league. But I think as well, on going back to the first point, you're expected to win it, we're not. On the first point is, I mean, I said I wasn't going to mention local councils, and I'm going to go launch straight in with an example. But many years ago, I went to the Space Centre place at Didcot, where they're doing all the satellites and things. Serco were running it back then. I don't know if they still are, but we had a contract and we got invited down for the day. And we looked at a lot of the data they were using and how they were using satellite data and imagery, and shown us literally the position of every single fishing boat in the world on a James Bond style globe map, pointing them all out. Yeah, they were tracking them as to whether they were doing trawling or whether two boats met in the middle of a thing. Yeah, it was. I found it really interesting. There was one on jellyfish as well, and how they blocked inlets at one of the, was it a nuclear plant? I think had an issue with it where they came down the coast and they managed to pick up the whatever they emit, jellyfish, when they're in vast numbers. There's a scent, and the satellite could pick it up and therefore highlight where they all were in the water. So as they were coming down the coast, they could close their gates, wait for the jellyfish swarm to go past them, and then open them again. So the sluice gates effectively weren't full of fish. Wow. I thought this was all really good. And then they got into a point where actually your local council were doing something with planning data and satellite. Your local council. And
I would like to add there that they do absolutely naff all with planning data at the moment.
I know, but
they're just slamming stuff up everywhere. But anyway, that's another topic for another day.
They used to do planning enforcement using satellite imagery. So they basically take an image of today or yesterday, then put an image on top of everywhere where they'd given planning permission. Then they'd overlay that with a new satellite image, and they'd built a tool that basically went identify anything that's changed between the two that's outside of one of the new planning permission boundaries. And that's how they were doing planning enforcement. I think it was a pilot and a trial, but in any case, I went back to my council and went, this is a really good idea. We should do something like this. And the reply was, we don't need that. We already know where all the bands up building stuff happens. And you're like, okay, that's interesting. And that was almost that first time where it wasn't that they couldn't get the data.
Yeah.
It's that they didn't.
Where was it? Where did I write that down?
It was like,
yeah. Is that you? Who was it?
Because we found some somewhere once in an area, we know that's where it all happens. It couldn't possibly happen anywhere else in the district. And it wasn't so much they couldn't get the data or get hold of it. We could have done something. It was more, we just know. We've worked this area a long time, therefore our gut instinct is it only happens in these certain wards within where I used to work. But again, I would come at it from that's fine, but you're looking at those wards and therefore you're catching stuff in those wards. Therefore you're giving your own gut instinct more kind of feedback, but you're not looking at the other ones anyway. So your opinion's always going to be, it's where I'm looking, because that's where you're finding it. So yeah, I think sometimes it's definitely not wanting to look at data. I think gut instinct's fine in a lot of cases, especially if you're experienced, but you also get the one. I was trying to find a cartoon a minute ago because I'm sure I copied one the other week, and it was someone saying, I want to do this, and someone saying, have we got the data for it? And him saying, can you get me the data that supports my opinion, sort of thing. So again,
Mm.
people can take the data and then apply what they want to it to say, my gut instinct was right based
Ah.
on the data I asked for that supports my gut instinct.
Well, it's like the data never lies unless you make it lie,
Hmm.
which obviously is it's very true in a lot of cases. And, yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think there's loads of different data. There's so much information now that it almost becomes a little bit overwhelming. But you have to look at actually if you start with not replacing your gut instinct, but data and insight, same with any technology, are there to support your decision making. If you just give yourself some validation, that sounds
Yeah.
wrong. Give yourself validation. Give your decision give your gut instinct validation. Then there's even if you get it right 9 out of 10 times, that one time that you don't get it right, you could have saved yourself a lot of hassle and money potentially, and but also for the wider, if you're interested in the gut instinct, where's the traceability of that? Where's the context? Where's the learning from it?
Yeah.
It happens, obviously, oh yeah, so and so made that decision, and we're now seeing the outcome. Well, how are you connecting the two? Is it just on memory? What if that person leaves? What if you have a change of shift? What if something completely changes? Then suddenly you've lost that information, or as I said the other day, you lose that business brain. All that information that somebody has that's been in your business 10 years suddenly walks out the door, then you've gone, did we
Yeah.
manage to get them? Like, did we get that information out of them? Or do we know where we've kept that? Or do we know who did that, where they did it, or where they kept it? And that's the danger of relying solely on instinct, I think, as well. Well, a
Yeah.
danger.
Yeah. And I mean, we had someone who worked for us many, many years ago who was the GIS guy. So looked at all the mapping and graphical
Mm.
data. He retired and left, and literally 99%, I think, of what he did or knew was in his head. And it wasn't just losing one person who did who, if you looked from the outside and thought that's all you do, that's quite simple. Actually, there was so much knowledge and stuff around
It's not.
how he did it,
Yeah.
when he did it, all that stuff. It was, yeah, irreplaceable in a lot of cases. But I think there's something as well about, we've talked about obviously data having a bad rep and being seen as this massively complex or difficult thing. And therefore, for some people, it's almost easier to put a shutter up and go, well, data's too hard to understand. Therefore, I'll just use my gut instinct and we'll go this way. Uh, and I think sometimes, again, we've said it, that the industry itself is compliant in that of trying to make out how difficult it is.
Mm.
But actually, in a way, you could kind of compare it to taking a drive from here to Birmingham without using anything.
Your car. Oh.
Or I do, funny enough, or getting from here to Birmingham but using Waze
Mm.
and understanding how in my gut, I know how to get to Birmingham. I know the roads. It's very straightforward, but actually, I don't know if there's traffic jams ahead or issues that I'm not aware of. Whereas if I'm driving to Birmingham, even though I know how to get there, if I've got something with a little bit of data saying actually the M6 is knackered this morning, or the M42's got roadworks, which I'm pretty sure it has had for the last 50 years anyway, then
Same as the
that's
M1.
kind of that's kind of useful data that's helping you and get to where you want to be. It's not saying replace all your knowledge with
No, it's a
data.
supportive, isn't it? It's enriching the decision making. It's supporting the decision making. You're never going to look at, it's there because it won't. I mean, AI can come up with suggestions and ideas, but ultimately it's your decision whether you implement them or not. You can't. I mean, you probably can, but you can't say go and do a massive produce a product and email out and gather all and do this and create this design and do that. You mean you probably can get some idea, but ultimately whether you implement that, it is your decision. So it's the same with anything. I mean, you will be looking at information in one way or another to make that decision, whether it's structured and gathered and organized, or whether you're looking at things and know from experience that actually this is that. You're still basing that on information. You're
Yeah,
basing that decision. Even gut instinct is somewhat in some way formed of some kind of information ingestion that you've obtained over the years.
Yeah.
Um,
Just sitting up there, not in a spreadsheet.
well, yeah, it's like I'm gonna hit my desk, but I know from experience that's not a very good idea. So I'm gut instinct is telling me to stop, not do it. But actually, it's because it hurts, or I'll break my desk, break my lovely new desk.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting. There's a lot. It's a lot of yeah. It was just an interesting article. It was kind of like you keep stumbling across these articles, the same kind of thing, like that it's complicated or I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to look at it, and you're like, oh, at what point can you not rely on instinct anymore? And and I think there's also in that post there's a whole stack of breaches recently as well that are happening, as we spoke about before, that are still making the press. Seem to be making the press. Maybe they listen to us.
Maybe they
Maybe
do.
you're
Maybe that's our
listening.
one listener, Richard, that
Oh,
someone at Computer World or Computer Weekly who sits
TechCrunch. These
sits and
guys got
listens
a good
in.
idea.
Yeah.
It's
But
mental.
it's but although you can, I mean, it's one of those things, isn't it? You can argue, you can make it as complex as you want, but you can make it as simple as you want. And I wouldn't advise doing this, but you could basically do a test, couldn't you, and get in your car and go, right, drive at 30 miles an hour without looking at the speedo, because you've driven your car hundreds of times. You know what it's like to drive at 30 miles an hour, but can you accurately do that without looking at the data right in front of you that
Mm,
says this is the speed you're doing? And probably most people will be in the ballpark of right.
there or thereabouts. Yeah.
Yeah. But actually being accurate and driving at 30 and getting it spot on is quite difficult without that element of data. And again, it's not complex data that you always need to make these decisions. Sometimes it can be very simple and very basic. But I think again we've created an environment where almost like, well, let me build you a BI kind of dashboard and all this stuff. I don't need that. I just need you to tell me whether I should go left or right, sort of thing.
Yeah, you can, and I think that's something I advocate. Is like it's best to do almost work. You work on short wins and bigger picture at the same time. But because the quicker win, they inform the wider
Yeah,
requirements and wider project anyway. Because quite often when you're going down the quick iterative kind of output, you're going, oh, actually, you're actually creating that conversation, and you're really nailing the requirements because if you go away, as I said before, for 6 months and build something and come back and everyone just goes, pile of crap, we're way on from that. And which not necessarily is, it isn't necessarily a pile of crap, it's just the world's changed. But
yeah,
you have to keep up with that pace. So the second topic I think is quite relevant as well, because moving on to how much data and what's important data, because and how it can change the perception of something. So gut instinct's one thing. So if you were to think of a striker in football, if you are reasonably educated, as I am in football, maybe not you, but
I'm glad you added in
you,
football at the end of that instead of insulting everyone watching this who doesn't like football.
no,
Uh,
it's just concept, isn't it? I think if you know, you have an idea what a striker's supposed to do, and a goalkeeper.
yeah,
They're reasonably clearly defined as an outcome. But when you think actually so and so hasn't scored for 10 weeks, what the hell are they doing? Actually, you go, no, but the team's been winning, and what's the guy's contribute or what's the players,
yeah,
contribution to that game? And it could be really, really good, really, really strong. And you're thinking, actually, there's way more to this. And it's interesting that the teams are using. I mean, they're one of the sports teams now are some of the most data rich and data heavy usage going because of the amount of information they have. And it's just interesting to how to change that perception. And again, and it's also like the training load. I was reading up on that someone might be training or in a match and they're running and they keep going, they're still going, they seem full of it. But actually, looking at the data, they're redlining. They're just about where
yeah,
injuries become a problem and things. So visually, they're having a blinding game. They're doing something amazing. They're contributing massively. They're really involved. But if they're redlining, then their chances of injury become much greater or making a mistake, for example. without that information, you go, I'm not taking them off. They're having a
Yeah.
blinder, and then bang, the hamstring goes or something, and it's like, then they're out for weeks. So, but having that awareness now to go, you need to pull them off because, excuse me, you need to substitute them.
Substitute them maybe. If they're
It's like
redlining, you don't want to be
that's,
pulling them off,
that's,
Richard.
you don't want to
That's
put
the worst
anybody
thing
off when
you
it's
can do.
redlining.
Yeah.
That's not on me. Maybe a wrong expression. You need to get them substitute, replace them. Yes, and because then you're preventing. Yes, you might be taking a bit of impetus out of a process or a project or a product or a development or something, but actually the longer term benefit of having that person available is way outweighs 15, 20 minutes of a or a shorter period in a process.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it as well, Richard, isn't just the data they're now collecting. It's the fact they're now kind of collecting and using almost real time in a
Mm.
lot of this as well. So, I mean, the American sports are very good at it. In almost, if you watch baseball, you can almost have the Amazon screen up that's got all the stats on, as showing you the speed of the pitch and the hit and where's it gone, and everything else live as the ball's being
Yeah.
pitched. And you kind of like, you just wouldn't have had that. You might have had a speed gun and it come up afterwards. That'd be the closest. But to almost have real time informatics about what's happening in front of you probably lends itself to American sports better because they've got more breaks and they're a
Well,
bit
yeah.
slower in
I started
general.
watching American football on TV the other day, and I was like,
Oh, you know,
I mean, it's like,
I really enjoy American football, watching it. But I went to a live game and it was one of the worst things I've ever done in my life. It
and you've
takes
done quite a few of those.
Yeah. Oh, it just takes forever. It's so slow. It's all right on TV because they cut to the studio or they cut to another game or you're watching something. But when you're watching live, and every 15 seconds, effectively, there's another 30-second break or another 45-second break before the next thing happens. The atmosphere is terrible because they
Yeah.
build it for about 10 seconds. They'll go, whoa, and then the bloke falls over and it's like, oh, and then you wait 45 seconds, then you'll go, ugh. And it's not like
Well,
football where you can build and build and build. It's not like that. But they have got to the point where they use data a hell of a lot and they use it in real time. And I'm going to mention Leicester again because obviously they won the Premier League
yes.
gloriously many years ago. But they had a really good scouting system. And why we got Mahrez and Kante and people like that was because of the data that the scouts produced. And it
Mm.
wasn't look at this guy, he's a brilliant player. It was look at how far he runs each game, how much distance he covers. People always say it's having Kante on the pitch is like having two players sometimes because he's everywhere. Leicester had that in the stats when they were scouting him. That's why they brought him in. Mahrez the same for the runs he did as a winger. And so again, you're not just watching a game and thinking that guy's quite good. You can watch it and go, actually, here's a set of stats
It's backed
that's
up by
backed
information.
up by.
Mm.
So again, gut instinct might be, yeah, I think we like this guy. He could be good, but then backed up by, wow, he's running 11 kilometers a game and covering all this distance. He's doing 55 sprints and he's not even getting into amber, let alone redlining.
It's just like,
Doing that, you kind of like, yeah, it's just kind of like, right, he's someone we want. And likewise, I know you want to mention Haaland as a great goal scorer, but actually, even when he's not scoring goals, because everyone else knows he's a great goal scorer, you know he's pulling two or three defenders away, which is leaving gaps open for all the other guys to go in. So he can go 10 games without scoring. He probably would never go 10 games, but he could go 10 games without scoring. But he's still probably contributed to a number of goals in each of those games just from the runs he makes or the movement he does.
mm.
And again, so you don't necessarily have to just look at him as how many goals a season are you scoring. It's what are you doing to disrupt our opposition or our other teams we're playing against. And I think even in business, you can kind of look at that and go, okay, we might not be doing exactly what we set out to do, but we're actually disrupting other areas or we're
Do you know
interrupting.
what I think it is as well? It's like it shines a light on the non-sexy stuff, the non-headline grabbing processes and people and products potentially, and areas of the business that may go unnoticed or because they're not headline grabbing or something like that. So it shines a light on every aspect. And what it can do, it can highlight something that you go, oh shit, I didn't know that. Good or bad, obviously.
Yeah.
Could be good, could be great. It could be like, oh, I didn't know that was going on. But it shines a light on that just because it's like it's not, and as we spoke about before with financial metrics, it's not revenue, it's not profit, it's not sales, it's not everything like amazing. Look at a nice conversion rate. Yeah, but if you're only doing two sales, what the hell does that? Two quotes. What does that mean?
Yeah.
It's like what does that mean? It's nothing. It's a nonsense metric. So, but it shines a light on areas that maybe people don't stand up and shout, or they're not particularly exciting, or it's something that
Yeah.
you might have been churning away, throwing, producing something that sells 10 a year, but actually you're like, oh, they just sell 10 a year. If you knew what the capacity was, or what, there's some other element of information. I mean, you could probably sell 30 of those, 40 of those if we actually produced more. But just because it's like a boring, or no one really
Yeah.
clamours after it, you know what I mean? You kind of like, once you piece that picture together, it's like, actually, we're doing this. And it's money for old rope in some respects. Like, it's something we do without even thinking about it. Yet actually, it's a huge contributor, just because it's not anything that anyone's particularly, massively shouting about.
But well, even my software, the most basic premise of it is you're capturing some of this data that you've never captured before. And you might not use all the categories, but if you use decisions, or decide as they are in the system, and just capture all the decisions you've made as a business over the last 6 months, and then pull a report from that to go, right, how have all these decisions impacted what we've done?
Mm,
The insight it can give you is incredible compared to you trying to remember every decision you made. You've got, what was the decision? Why did we make it? What was the outcome? And then, as you said, you might be looking at your numbers going, why have we only sold 10 of this, but we've sold 20 of that one, or 30 of that? Here's all the decisions. Well, we clearly have targeted people in that area or something, or doing that. But there's so much stuff, again, that I think just sits in people's heads, or maybe in an email or somewhere else, that is data they've got, but it's not used. And they don't really know how to pull some of that more unstructured data together to give them insights as well. And I think sometimes that's where the gut comes in, where data, I think, in a lot of areas is still seen as a numerical value
mm,
of some sort. And so, unless there's some numbers to support what you're doing, it's probably seen as, well, that's the data bit. Whereas actually, it can be a list of words that you've used it. I'm not going to say word clouds, but word clouds are a basic example from the past, which hopefully stay in the past.
you're going to say Gantt chart then as well for a minute.
No, don't. I'm having to deal with those at the moment. Word clouds live in the past, they stay in the past, but what they basically were was pulling data through on what were the most used ones. So you can kind
Mm,
of see what they look like. And it's, a lot of the time, I do think it's the kind of qualitative, unstructured stuff that actually people need to be thinking about, as much as the quantitative kind of structured numbers, spreadsheets and flows that they can look at. And if you can bring the two together,
mm,
then you've got really good insights, because it's then almost like, how is the footballer playing, and show me all their stats. But at the same time, we possibly asked him how he felt, how he was before the game, what the weather was, what the temperature was, how he was training before the pitch, all that stuff. Match the two together, and then you've got almost, I hate saying 360 view, but kind of I don't know, roll your eyes,
Gosh,
but
you're doing full on jargon eyes at the
hold
moment.
on,
What
I
are you
know.
doing, man?
I've been on a course, a
Oh,
full.
what
I've not. I'm doing Rory Sutherland's course next month, though. I'm looking forward to
are
that.
you?
But yeah, you do have a full 360 view of what's happening. It's not just how did you play; it's
Yeah.
how were you running up to the game as well, and how were you afterwards. Because, as you say, the red line stuff, if you come off afterwards and he goes, yeah, actually, I did feel a tweak, or I felt this, you never let that player get to that point
Mm,
again. You stop before that happens.
yeah, it's true. It's almost as well as I think a lot of it, which doesn't often get looked at, is exception reporting. And what I mean by that is you don't just report the same stuff every week, day, month, whatever. You call out things that you don't see. You can
Yeah,
spot exceptions, even if it's something that, yeah, but we don't look at that. Well, maybe you should. Just because you don't report the standard metric, you can report. Don't just report the standard metrics every single period. Report the standard metrics, and then anything else that is of interest that falls outside. You think actually these are the boundaries and parameters we've set. What falls outside of that? It doesn't matter whether it's selling one item or 1,000 items, or it doesn't really do a lot of massive profit. That's still a contributing factor to your overall performance. So you don't have to report everything. You report your standard metrics that you need, but then okay, well, what else? What else is going on that we don't have visibility of? What else is there? So that's another very powerful bit, and that's the that's the bit that adds the extra value. So using the striker analogy, it's like, yeah, you might not have scored, but what other exceptions have been happening that we didn't know about or we don't see?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's, thinking about, I think it always comes down to, doesn't it? Just thinking about data in a slightly different way to what you've probably thought of it as being because of how
Mm.
it's been presented to you previously. And just having a bit of a more open-minded approach to what is data and what's useful data and how do we use it
What
as
is
an
data?
organisation with people. What is data? That
Who is who is
could be a
data?
could be a whole series of its own. That one.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, it's one of those, isn't it? Where I think the barriers we put up originally about you must be a data scientist and you must be competent and you must be a mathematician or a statistician, you must know all this stuff. We need to get back to very simple, basic data that Joe Public can look at, use, understand, and be able to do something with without need a scientist sat next to him to interpret it and explain it.
It also comes back to the question of who owns the data, because a lot of that will come from if you allocate ownership, identify ownership to within a business to that data originates in your system, in your department, or in your process. You use it or create it, then you own that data. And then suddenly the interest becomes, well, actually, I'm responsible for it. If that nothing from a governance and a process ownership security concept as well. But actually, then how can I use it? Because you add
Yeah,
then suddenly it's like, well, I own it, it's mine, so I'm responsible for it. So how can I leverage it? And quite often it's always back to that, we said before, that's by man. It's not me, is it? It's IT
yeah,
or finance, so I don't use it. And he's like, well, you do. And it's like, well, that's another part of why it's important to review what data you have, what systems you have, because that's the first standpoint that enables you to go, okay, well, this is what we've got, this is where we need to get to, allocate who's responsible for it, bring people together, work out how do we then get that from here to here, because then it's bringing that additional bit. Everything comes into the pot. Okay, well, what do we need? How we don't need everything. But we need some bits, and
yeah.
it's that starts that process.
And that I think means when you're in business or working, almost having data as a standing agenda item
Mm.
within the business of something you do talk about, and it's not shoved under the carpet and someone else's job. It's up there, kind of top. I wouldn't say top of the list, but second or third on the list of things you need to be discussing. And yeah, even the flows of data. I hate doing it to you, Richard, but I'm going to have to. But when I wrote this, uh, come back. But even in that, years ago, I talked about data and the flow, even from your sales kind of CRM into your service CRM, and your service team understanding exactly what was sold, what conversations were had, why the customer has this particular expectation of it that you don't know about. If you're sat on two completely separate systems from sales and service, you're never going to be able to treat the customer in a way that they expect to be treated because your sales guys, let's be honest, have probably said yes to most things, agreed most things to get the sale over the line because we've all worked with them. And your service team is sat there going, why the hell are we being asked for this, or why are we being told it does this? Whereas actually, if you've got that flow sitting going, okay, I understand why he said yes to that, there is something we can do. It makes a lot more sense. And
Also
so,
put some control around it as well. It's like you can't say yes to that because you have visibility of the pipeline of the work, the
yeah,
work packages that we've still got to go. So yes, you can say yes, but there's got to be some context of it's going to take a period of time before we look at it,
yeah,
and then you've
and,
got the period of time to do it. Don't say yes, we're going around next week because it's if you can't do that because
yeah.
it's so
And
there
yet you'll
is
still
things
see a
that
sales team kind of siloed from the service or the operations team, and a bit siloed, even possibly from marketing. They're selling one message, they're selling something else, and they're trying to build something else in the background. So, yeah, even just how the data flows around your own business internally, I think is one of the key topics they should be discussing
I
as well.
agree.
But anyway, that brings us nicely to an end.
We
You've got
didn't
your
even
steps in.
mention.
What didn't I mention?
I've just hit the red line. Medic, medic, take me off. I don't know. How's your car doing anyway?
It's still sat out there with
Sulking.
sellotape holding it together, sulking. At some point, I'll go get it fixed, but until the MOT's due in March, it might sit there. It
Yeah.
works fine. You've just got to take a couple of bits of tape off to fill it up. And because I don't do that many miles, I only fill it up once every 2 weeks. So it's not like it's a big hindrance on my life at the moment. So
Yeah.
I can't really see the point of having it fixed. It's a conversation starter at the petrol station. Why's your car got black tape all over it?
Yeah. What have you got strapped inside your
Officer.
petrol tank, officer?
Yeah.
Nothing illegal. That's just genuine petrol entrance, officer. There's not a
I'm pretty
dodgy
sure.
concealed packages in there.
If anyone was smart, they could walk past, take it off, and siphon all the diesel out, but they haven't yet. I'm sure they will now,
Proper
said that.
diesel.
Yeah, proper car.
Anyway,
Right,
let's stop before I start talking about planning permission and how the MK Council have gone off
absolutely.
their process. The
And
thing that was working very well is now not working at all. And how it takes
perfect,
me 35
perfect
minutes
name.
to take my daughter to school, and it's 1.9 miles away. It took me 35 minutes yesterday. But anyway,
But anyway, let's not get into that.
no, I just accidentally did. But hey,
But yeah, next time I see you, I will also have a standing desk, and we'll be doing my miles while I work.
I don't believe you.
No,
You can get a little treadmill underneath as well. Apparently,
yeah, I've
so you
seen
can
that.
do what? That's a bit too much, I think.
That's a bit much, isn't it? Spill my tea. So
You fall off.
exactly. Right, imagine that halfway through a meeting and you redline and you just shoot. That's not a good look.
That'd be funny though, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Right, on that note, we're done.
Anyway, I'm going
I'll speak to
downstairs.
you soon.
See you later.
Cheers, bye.